We're back now to give you the legal edge, and joining us as always is Bryan Waldman from the Sinus Stramus Law Firm. And in this warmer weather, Michiganders really enjoy our Great Lakes. I know I do, and for many of us this means walking the shoreline of our beaches. So there have been some disputes though between property owners and beach walkers. So Bryan, we want to know what people's rights are when it comes to walking on beaches in the Great Lakes.
Sure, Siobhan. So all the states on the Great Lakes have had to wrestle with this issue. Indiana most recently, that's where the recent news came about. But Michigan dealt with this issue really about 15 years ago, 14 years ago, a dispute on Lake Huron, where a property owner was trying to prevent people from walking the shoreline behind their property. And the Michigan Supreme Court was pretty clear. People can walk the beach under something called the public trust doctrine. They're allowed to walk the beach. And then the court went on and tried to define a little bit more where people can and cannot walk.
Okay, so they can walk the beach. Do they have to be in the water? Do they have to be close to the water? How close can they get to a person's home?
Right, so that was really the crux of the issue in the Michigan Supreme Court case. Okay. And the property owners didn't dispute people could walk the shoreline, but they said our property rights extend to the water. And therefore, if you want to walk the beach, you need to be in the water. Okay. And the Supreme Court clearly said no. Under the public trust doctrine, that's not the case. You can walk anywhere between the water and something called the ordinary high water mark.
So what does that mean, the ordinary high water mark?
Well, the ordinary high water mark is something that applies to oceans and the Great Lakes. This legal doctrine applies to those bodies of water. And with an ocean, it's a little easier to determine. So we've got high tide and low tide. So you look at where that high tide line is, and it's anywhere on the water side of high tide. Great Lakes, a little more confusing. There are variables that affect where the water, how far up the shore and how far away from the shore it goes. But ultimately, the Supreme Court looked at that and said, look, we're going to look to the law in Wisconsin. We're going to follow what another Great Lakes state has done. And we're going to say the ordinary high water mark is where there's a mark through erosion or the killing of land-based plants or some other distinct characteristic that lets us know where the water has been at some point. It's receded back down, but maybe it's likely to get to that point at some point in the future.
That makes sense, and you should be able to spot it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to review, you can walk the beaches or shorelines of the Great Lakes. You don't need to be in the water, even in wet sand, but you can't be too far away from the water's edge.
Absolutely, and you can walk the Great Lakes shoreline, but that doesn't mean you can stop in front of someone's house, camp out, build a bonfire. You got to keep walking.
It might be tempting, but don't do that. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you as always for giving us the legal edge.
Thanks, Siobhan.